Hey friends, welcome back to another video. My name is Emma Lefebvre, and today I'm going to answer a question that I've been asked many times. How do you prevent your watercolor from beading up on your palette? So let's jump right in and answer it. Okay, so today is going to be a quick video, but I'm answering a question that I have been asked multiple times, and it's a good question. How do I get my paint to stop beading on my palette? So here I have a brand new palette. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I am going to show you. This is something that happens with brand new plastic palettes. So I didn't even want to take it out of the packaging to show you. I got it off Amazon. I believe it was $10. I'll link it below. It's the same as the one I use. I'm actually going to be filling this up for my cousin's kids with some paint, so they have a watercolor palette. But I wanted to show you what beading is and how to prevent it. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly show you. This is my palette, okay? Same thing, it's just full. And ideally, when you're mixing colors on your palette, you want the color to kind of stick, okay? You want it to stay in one spot, so you can add other colors to mix and you can see the result of the color you're mixing, okay? But with a brand new palette, I'll show you what happens, which you've probably come across before. You do this and it beads up and you can't really see that color and it's super obnoxious, right? Doesn't matter what color you use, it beads up into these little spots. And what you want is that you want to see the color. You want to see it everywhere. It's so much easier to use when you have it react like this. So why does it happen with new palettes and how can you get it to stop? Okay, so this, I don't think I've tried many ceramic palettes. Doesn't tend to happen with ceramic palettes. Some tin palettes are okay, but this mostly happens with plastic palettes because there is some sort of coating or film on it that makes the water bead up into these little beads. So what we want to do is we want to try and eliminate that smooth surface that is causing it to do that. And I'm going to show you how to do that very simply. So before I figured out this trick, I used to just continue using my palettes until it stopped. And eventually it actually will. So 5 years ago when I started, my palettes would do this. I didn't really think too much of it because I was a new beginner and I was just like, whatever. The more you use it, it will stop over time. So if you want to just keep using it, just do what you need to do. But here is a little trick. So I am going to wipe off this paint. I've had people tell me that you can use one of those Mr. Clean magic erasers and scrub it really well. I haven't tried that. But another thing you can do is use a glue stick. Okay, so I have this glue stick and I've used, this isn't a fancy glue stick, it just looks pretty. But I've used like a dollar store glue stick before, one that I took from school, just a cheap glue stick. And what you want to do is put a layer of glue on your mixing well, okay? Not too much. Like, don't go crazy and overdo it where it's like super sticky. And this works. You might have to do it a few times. And then you're just going to kind of rub it in. And it creates this like sticky layer. So you're rubbing it in, but also kind of trying to get it off. You don't want to completely wash it off. But you also don't want it to be completely crazy sticky. You can add like a tiny bit of water to your paper towel, just a little. Just move it around. Okay, and like I said, you might have to do this a couple times. Okay, you're not completely wiping it off. Just want to make sure there's a little bit of stickiness there. Okay, so don't wash it off necessarily, but like a tiniest, thinnest layer to wipe it around. Okay, and let's see if that helps. Let's hope it does. Okay, so I'm going to take my color now. And there you go. Okay, it still beads a little. Like I said, over time it will get better, but that's definitely more of an improvement than it was. Okay, let's grab a different color. See the difference? All right, let's try it over here. I'm gonna add another little layer here. Oops. So it does, like I said, it does bead a little bit still. You can do the process again. But after a little bit, it should be fine. Okay, so I'm just gonna move it around, get a new clean spot of the paper towel, move it around. Let's hope. And there you go. Okay, so that's to help prevent beading on your brand new palette. Let's do it to these little mixing wells. Let's do a little before and after again. Let's pick a different color. Let's do yellow. There's our beading palette. Super obnoxious. And it's funny because it looks like there's such a little amount of paint there. There's actually so much paint in those little beads, and you're just wasting, or it feels like you end up using more when it beads like that. Glue, 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 glue. Okay, let me see if I can show you. You can see how much is on there if I tilt it towards the light. Okay, it's like a little layer like that. Rub it all over. Okay, I'm going to use a new spot of my paper towel. You can use a tiny, tiny bit of water, like the tiniest little bit, so it doesn't feel too crazy sticky. Okay, and the little bit of glue, like if it's to get into your paint and you're painting, it shouldn't do anything at all. Okay, now let's try another color. And there we go, here. So it still does bead a little bit. Again, you can do the glue process. Yeah, see, that's beading a little bit. I might need to do it one more time. Let's try purple. Okay, still way better than it was. Let's do another round. Don't like that I'm wasting watercolor, but it's fine. I have lots. I have lots. Okay, I'm gonna wipe it off, do our glue again. But people have also said that doing the magic eraser works. I just haven't had one in my house, so I haven't done it. Now let's try again. Forget what color I used. Green. There we go. So much better. And there you go. And that is how to prevent beading on your brand new plastic palette. Okay, so one more question that I get asked a lot from beginners when they have a new palette is, do I need to clean my wells in between each time I do a painting? And my answer to that is no. I will always reuse colors in my palette. If there's a color in here that I don't necessarily want to use, like in my blue well, and I want to use like a darker blue or a different blue, I tend to just use like one spot, or I'll mix it in there and it will create a new shade. I'm just not anal about that. Some people are. Some people swear that they'll get muddy colors if they don't do it, but I have designated spots for my colors. I probably will clean these two because I usually typically put my red here and my greens here, my blues here, purples there, yellows there. So really, if I wanted to mix a new blue, adding a dark blue to this tone is not really gonna make a huge difference for me, so I won't waste this watercolor and clean it up before I do a new painting. This green, if I want to do more of like a yellowy green, having this already in there is not gonna make too much of a difference, so I'll just like add my sap green to one little spot, add a little bit of yellow, and mix it there. Okay, I always reuse my watercolors. People who swear that their colors get too muddy or they're just not as familiar with mixing may want to wash their palettes just here, not underwater, because you don't want to get these all wet and then waste watercolor. But if they want to wash their mixing wells, that's perfectly fine. I just don't do that because I don't want to waste watercolor. This can be dried for years, and you can just add water to it and use it again. That's just my preference. So I will tell you as a beginner, you don't need to, but just have designated areas for your mixing. So that's why I have my colors in this order. So all my yellows will be mixed there. My reds and pinks will be mixed here. My purples and sometimes pinks will be mixed there. My greens will all be mixed here. Blues were here, and then like browns and blacks are right here, which is, I don't use often, which is why it's a little bit dirtier and dustier. I should clean that, but that's fine. So again, I'm just not too anal about it. So it's totally up to you, but that's my 2 cents about it. Okay, so this palette that I just kind of, I want to say primed with my glue, I'm actually giving away to my cousin's daughters. So I wanted to fill it up with watercolors for her and send it their way. So as a little bonus to this video, I'm just going to show you how I kind of arranged this palette. I had these Holbein watercolors that were given to me that I just have so many watercolors, I don't tend to use them. So I thought I would fill this palette up with these colors for them to use. And if you haven't seen any of my palette setup videos before, the way I use watercolor, I use watercolor tubes. They are my favorite. I find it easier to purchase them singly when I run out of a color. I use Winsor & Newton professional watercolors, so if I need more greens, I'll just go out and buy a green. I don't need to buy a set. And I find it's a lot harder to find individual pans from a pan watercolor than it is to find tubes. So you can use these wet straight out of the tube. However, I do not recommend it for beginners because as beginners, we tend, how do I say this? We tend to use more paint than we think we need because, you know, painting with acrylic, or if you've painted in school with like tempera paint, you need like big globs of paint, or you've painted a room in your house, you need a lot of paint. And that's just not how watercolor works. Definitely as a beginner, I definitely used like watercolor paint as like an acrylic paint before. And you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to add water to make it stretch. So I like to use them dry out of my palette, like you've seen here, like in all my tutorials, they're always dry. And that's the beauty of watercolor, is that they are water soluble. So you can have your palette open and have a dried paint, and you just add watercolor, or you add water to it, and voila, you got paint. So that is also what has drawn me to this medium, is that I can walk away whenever I need to, especially being a mom. You know, your kid needs you, or they wake up from their nap and you have to stop painting. You don't have to worry about putting your acrylic paints away so they don't dry out. I can literally just leave it here in my mixing wells and everything and come back when I need to. So I like to use them dry. There are artists that will swear that, oops, that was wet, that it is more vibrant when you use it straight out of the tube and wet, which is all great. You just do whatever works best for you. So that's all I'm going to say. There's no right or wrong way. This is just the way I do it and the way I prefer it. So I thought I'd just show you how I would set up this palette with these colors. I may add some like Cotman colors for them from my Winsor & Newton Cotman tubes, because I don't use those as much anymore. But this is how I do it. So looking at my palette, that's up there. Like I said, put my yellows here, reds and oranges here, purples, pinks kind of here, greens, blues, blues, blacks, and whatever. Okay, so I'm just going to start by placing where I like them. So I have a yellow here, I have a yellow ochre here, which I will also place. Crimson Lake is the red. Vermilion is more of like an orangey red. So I'll put that kind of here first, and then the darker red. Greens will go over here. These paints are really good quality. I'm just not a huge fan of the hues that they come with. Not my favorite. So I'll put my blues here, brown here, black, and I probably won't add white. I never use white, to be honest. Maybe I'll add white for them because they might like it. I'll put those there. And like I said, this does not come with a pink or a purple, so I'm going to dig out some pink and purple paint for them. And yes, it is perfectly fine to mix brands. The only suggestion is that I would make sure they're reputable brands. So if you're using really, really cheap watercolors, I like Artist Loft or Reeves, I actually wouldn't suggest putting them in a palette to dry. With really cheap watercolors, what you're gonna get is you're gonna get cracking pans that will just fall out, okay? They'll just fall out of your palette and you won't be able to really, they'll just be very difficult to use. So the cheaper brands, I don't recommend getting, especially watercolor tubes. If you want to go really cheap, which is totally fine because I used like an Artist Loft palette for like months before I really got into it, I would suggest getting like the pans. Like if you really want to go cheap, get pans. Don't get tubes of really cheap paint because you can't really put them, or unless you want to paint with them straight out of the tube, which is fine. But I would not put them in a palette to dry overnight. You'll find that they will crack, break, and fall out. So I don't do that. I don't suggest that. Holbein is a pretty decent brand. My favorite beginner kind of brand is Winsor Newton Cotman. Love these paints. This is what I started with. So I highly suggest those. And like I said, you can buy them in tubes and put them in there. Let's see what I got for them. Got some Permanent Rose. This is my favorite pink. And then Dioxazine Purple is like one of my favorite purples. Let's see if there's any other. Cadmium Red, no. Permanent Green, I might give them a bit of Sap Green. I think that's pretty good though. So now I'm just going to start placing them in the palette. So they don't all have to be side by side, and I'm going to be skipping a few wells in case they want to, you know, add more paint to their collection later on. So you just squeeze them in like so. I do love a good yellow ochre. Those would probably be my two go-to yellows. Not a fan, like this is supposed to be like a reddish color, but it's more orange. Not quite a fan of this. I really like more of like a deep true red, but it's okay. Light crimson, let's see what this looks like. This is a nice red. It's a nice deep red. Like that. Then we'll do pink next. This is my favorite pink by Winsor & Newton. Is this one dried? Oh, this is so old. This is like years and years and years old. I'll get a new one. That's why I have a new one. So many years old. And I may not have put the lid on quite well enough. This is one of my favorite purples. This is my favorite purple, Dioxazine Purple. It's great for mixing, a nice dark green too. Let's see this. Permanent Green. It's pretty neon, not necessarily a favorite of mine. Maybe I'll give them some Sap Green. I have a lot of Sap Green. Yeah, that's like my favorite green. Viridian Hue is more of like a bluey green, but it's great to mix with Dioxazine Purple to get like a nice dark hunter green. Prussian Blue is a really good, kind of like a neutral blue to have. Yeah, I'll put it here. Blue. Cobalt Blue is also a good, these are probably the two blues I would pick. Although this Cobalt Blue looks a little darker than usual, so we'll see. Then I'm going to do black. We'll do black and white over here. Should I? Yeah, we'll do black and white over here. I'm going to do black over here. I never really use white, but they might use white, so I'll just add it. I've never put a white in my palette before, but they might want it, so who knows. And then we'll do 2 browns. Got a burnt sienna here. And a burnt umber. Burnt umber is my go-to. Okay, so there is our palette all filled up, and what you have to do is you have to wait overnight. These are pretty full, so I'm probably going to wait 2 days before I ship them out, and that's about it. Thank you guys so much for watching my video. I really hope you liked it, and I hope you learned something. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and follow me on Instagram for even more. Have a great day, guys. Bye!